be attended to.
See, most of the complaints I hear are from people that are demanding that a tree be taken down or removed, and we
Right.
have a process for that.
Right.
We have to have a hearing because we're very reluctant to remove trees
Which
for
is
any
great.
reason. Unfortunately, now we have too many reasons to
Right.
remove them.
Right.
Yeah, so it's an administrative attempt to preserve trees, almost to a fault.
Which I think is probably a good thing, because I think sometimes the reason people want trees removed is because they don't like the leaves littering their yard, things like that. I mean, the real reason to remove them is for safety.
Yeah.
You know, just to go back to Lincoln for a minute, I mean, he wasn't a sentimentalist about trees. There was a very famous elm tree that was at the corner of Main and Pleasant Street that had been the place where General Lafayette had come to the city and been greeted. And people loved this tree. It had a great deal of significance, and it was right near Lincoln's father, Levi Lincoln Jr., who was the governor of Massachusetts, their home. But one day, one of the limbs just dropped off. And that's the thing about elm trees, is that they can drop a limb just without notice.
Really?
So his father didn't want to remove the tree, but eventually Lincoln had it taken down. Even though everybody was upset about it, you know, he put public safety first. And I think that's an important factor here, but you really have to weigh it. You have to be very careful on how you make that judgment.
Given that trees at risk now is almost 15 years old from the time.
Well, from the time that I
you started the
writing
research,
it, yeah, from 91.
And you actually published in 2001.
Right.
What can we learn from this book?
Well, really, what I've been saying all along is the question of paying attention to the trees, investing in the urban forest, maintaining them.
All right, we have to be
replacing-
very diligent.
Right.
And it depends on the property owner who's sitting there looking out their window at that tree, that tree is their responsibility as much as
the
city's. Yeah.
That's right. And you know, right now Worcester for the last 20 years has only planted one tree for every 4 removed. So we've been dwindling. Our urban forest has been dwindling. At the time that I wrote the book, there were only about 17,000 public trees on the streets left, and about a third of those were dying or damaged. You know, so the problem is that with an urban forest, you don't notice that it's dying off until something tragic happens, like the beetle infestation, and that's when people start paying attention.
Yeah. I know people that are living in the Burncoat area, which is near where we are, have observed to me in sort of in a very sad way that now with the trees being removed, the neighborhood has lost a lot of its life.
Absolutely.
And its beauty. And one of the reasons for trying to invest in trees is that it increases the value of the property.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of research that indicates that it's good for the soul and the psyche. The human species evolved from the savanna and from forests.
Right.
And so without that environment, we are losing something in terms of our own ability to cope.
Right. There's some research that shows that people who have trees outside hospital windows heal faster than people who don't.
Yes.
There's all kinds of
There
really
is.
interesting
Yeah,
connections.
yeah.
I mean, the other piece about trees in cities is they also they clean the air of pollutants. They control storm runoff. They moderate the climate in a cold, windy day or a hot summer day. And as you mentioned, it's a really important piece of increasing property values, which is the basis for being able to provide city services in the first place. So it's a really important investment in so many ways, as well as just the aesthetics, habitat for animals. They're it's very interesting to me whenever I talk about this subject and people know I've written a book about trees, they'll automatically start telling me some story about a tree, a favorite tree, a tree they've planted. People have very personal relationships with
Or even
trees.
as children, climbing a tree.
Right,
And
exactly.
just, being able to get as high as you can and then looking out over the world.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So they're almost like members of the family. And when they're taken down, people grieve.
Yes.
And so, I attended the hearing recently when the tree plan was announced, and a woman said from the Burncoat area, it looks like all we have on our street now are trees and houses and telephone poles. It's just barren, and it's a tragedy. It's
It
a
is.
tragedy to lose them, but you know, like that old song, you don't know what you've lost till it's gone.
Well, it's trees at risk. You were somewhat of a prophet in 2001, and you certainly are now. And thank you for having coffee with me today.
Thank you, Connie.
I've been talking to Evelyn Herwitz, and maybe next week I'll be